At 10:46 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday, January 2, 2026, President Donald Trump gave the final authorization. The order was simple but unprecedented. Capture the sitting president of a sovereign nation. Within hours, more than 150 American aircraft launched from 20 bases across the Western Hemisphere. Their destination? The fortified compound of Nicolás Maduro in Caracas, Venezuela. By Saturday morning, the world woke to images that seemed impossible. A foreign head of state, handcuffed, being perp-walked down a DEA corridor in New York City. The caption posted by the White House was just 2 words: perp-walked. But this wasn't about justice, and it wasn't really about drugs. This was about 303 billion barrels of oil, and a president who finally said the quiet part out loud. Operation Absolute Resolve didn't begin on Friday night. It began months earlier, in August 2025, when CIA operatives were covertly inserted into Venezuela. Their mission was to track Maduro's patterns, locations, and movements, everything from where he slept to what he ate. One source even operated inside the Venezuelan government itself, feeding real-time intelligence to Washington. By Friday night, weather conditions finally aligned. General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, gave the green light. At approximately 0300 hours local time, a coordinated cyber attack neutralized the command and control networks of the Venezuelan air defense system. Russian-made S-300 batteries went dark. Radar screens froze. In that window of electronic blindness, American stealth aircraft struck with surgical precision. They hit Higuerote Airport. They destroyed military runways at the massive Fuerte Tiuna complex outside Caracas. They severed communication lines between Maduro's palace and military units scattered across the country. Delta Force soldiers then rushed into Maduro's home, where the Venezuelan leader was sleeping alongside his wife. According to Trump, Maduro tried to flee to a steel-reinforced safe room but was quickly dragged into custody. Trump watched it all unfold in real time from Mar-a-Lago. "It was just like watching television," he told Fox News later. On screens around him, including a live feed of social media on X, he saw American helicopters hovering over Caracas, bullets flying, explosions lighting up the pre-dawn sky. Satellite images later revealed widespread destruction at the Fuerte Tiuna installation. Several buildings badly damaged or destroyed, vehicles reduced to rubble. Venezuelan officials reported casualties, though exact numbers remain unclear. Cuban officials said more than 80 people were killed, including 32 Cuban military and intelligence members. By sunrise, Maduro and his wife Celia Flores were aboard the USS Iwo Jima. Hours later, they landed at Stewart International Airport in Newburgh, New York, and were transferred to a Brooklyn detention center. The operation was tactically flawless. But strategically? That's where things get complicated. At his Mar-a-Lago news conference on Saturday, Trump initially framed the operation as a law enforcement action. Attorney General Pam Bondi announced that Maduro had been indicted on narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, and weapons charges. The indictment painted a damning picture. According to prosecutors, for more than 25 years, Venezuela's leaders have partnered with international drug trafficking organizations, including Mexico's Sinaloa cartel, the Zetas, Colombian narco-terrorist groups, and the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua, to ship illicit drugs into the United States. The charges claimed Maduro and Flores had their own state-sponsored gangs and ordered kidnappings, beatings, and murders against those who owed them drug money or undermined their trafficking operation. Secretary of State Marco Rubio echoed this narrative. At its core, this was an arrest of 2 indicted fugitives of American justice. It's a compelling story. There's just one problem. Trump himself couldn't stick to it. Within hours of announcing the capture, Trump pivoted to what this operation was truly about. And he didn't hold back. "We're going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure," Trump declared at Mar-a-Lago. Then came the bombshell. Trump said the United States would run Venezuela until there was a transition of power. When pressed about boots on the ground, he didn't rule it out. "We're not afraid of boots on the ground," he said casually. The justification was stunning. Trump and his advisors claimed that U.S. oil companies were stolen from ownership of the Venezuelan oil industry during nationalizations in 1976 and 2007. In Trump's view, This operation wasn't regime change. It was taking back what was rightfully America's. Rubio put it even more bluntly on NBC. You cannot continue to have the largest oil reserves in the world under the control of adversaries of the United States, referring to China, Russia, and Iran. Because here's what makes Venezuela so valuable. Venezuela is sitting on 303 billion barrels of crude, about a fifth of the world's global reserves. That's more than Saudi Arabia, more than Iraq, more than anywhere else on Earth. But there's a catch. Venezuela currently produces only about 860,000 barrels per day, less than 1% of global output. At its peak in the late 1990s, it was producing 3.5 million barrels daily. Decades of mismanagement, corruption, and sanctions have gutted the industry. American oil companies once dominated Venezuela's oil sector, accounting for more than 70% of the country's crude oil production before nationalization in the 1970s. When Hugo Chavez nationalized the industry again in 2007, companies like ExxonMobil and ConocoPhillips left the country. International courts ordered Venezuela to pay ConocoPhillips over $10 billion and ExxonMobil over $1 billion. Venezuela has paid only a fraction of those sums. Trump made clear that oil would cover the costs. We're going to be taking out a tremendous amount of wealth out of the ground, and that wealth is going to the people of Venezuela and people from outside of Venezuela that used to be in Venezuela, and it goes also to the United States of America in the form of reimbursement for the damages caused by that country. In other words, Venezuela's oil will pay for its own invasion. If this really was about stopping drugs, Trump's recent actions raise serious questions. Consider this timeline. Just weeks before capturing Maduro on drug trafficking charges, Trump pardoned the former president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez, who had been convicted in a U.S. court of cocaine trafficking. He also freed Ross Ulbricht, who created the Silk Road dark web marketplace used by drug traffickers worldwide. He granted clemency to Larry Hoover, serving multiple life sentences for drug trafficking with the Gangster Disciples. He even deported a high-ranking MS-13 leader back to El Salvador. Jeffrey Singer, a drug policy analyst at the Cato Institute, was skeptical. If this is what's motivating Trump, if it's stopping drug trafficking, why is he pardoning the Honduran president who was convicted of cocaine trafficking? It's never been about that. There's another telling detail. Trump has repeatedly blamed Venezuela for the spread of fentanyl in the United States, but the word fentanyl does not appear anywhere in the indictment against Maduro. The charges focus exclusively on cocaine. The drug war justification appears to be exactly what Singer called it, an excuse. Multiple analysts noted that the rhetoric about narcotics was aimed at providing legal cover, but Trump's own words in the aftermath revealed Washington's true interest in Venezuela's vast oil reserves. As of today, Venezuela is in limbo. Vice President Delcy Rodriguez denounced the operation as a kidnapping and was named acting president by Venezuela's Supreme Tribunal of Justice. But her authority is questionable. The military remains armed. Paramilitaries control parts of Caracas. Streets that are normally bustling sat eerily quiet on Sunday, with most businesses closed. And that assumes Venezuela doesn't descend into civil war. Operation Absolute Resolve represents something larger than Venezuela. It's the return of a particularly American approach to the Western Hemisphere, one that many thought had been abandoned after the disasters in Iraq and Afghanistan. Trump's words reveal the doctrine: we're in the business of having countries around us that are viable and successful, and where the oil is allowed to freely come out. This is the Monroe Doctrine on steroids, not just keeping European powers out of the Americas, but actively reshaping the hemisphere to serve American economic interests. The timing is also revealing. This operation occurred exactly 6 years after Trump ordered the drone strike that killed Iranian General Qasem Soleimani on January 3, 2020. The pattern suggests January has become Trump's preferred window for decisive geopolitical action. Maduro will face arraignment in Manhattan federal court today. His lawyers are expected to challenge the legality of his arrest and argue he's immune from prosecution as a sovereign head of state. But the legal battle is almost beside the point. Trump has already achieved his objective: regime change in Venezuela and potential access to the world's largest oil reserves. Whether that translates into actual economic benefit for the United States or becomes another quagmire remains to be seen. What's certain is this. On January 3, 2026, America crossed a line it hadn't crossed in decades, and the world is still trying to figure out what comes next.